Hey guys, Mike Lindstrom here. It's an annual event this year. It's special for me, not just as a father, but this is the year, 3 years ago that my book came out, What's Your Story? Discover the Man Behind Your Dad. So we're doing a little bit of promotion around Father's Day. And I wanted to share a story with a dear friend of mine, Meredith Decker, who you'll meet here in a minute with Decker Financial. I didn't know this, but when I started consulting and coaching Meredith a couple of years ago, I realized that she had a book, and the book is called The Fabric of a Storyteller. So I wanted to bring her on camera here with me to talk about, the story. Storytelling is such a big part of our lives, and that's one of our motives in the book. We have 114 questions that we believed as authors that every person should extract from their own father or mother or grandparent. So that's what was the inspiration for our book. But I wanted to have Meredith talk about what inspired her book, The Fabric of a Storyteller. We're going to tie this into how we bring that into business.
Right.
That we just kind of use Father's Day as an excuse to get on camera and just talk a little bit about our storytelling. So Tell us a little story about the book.
Well, I've always wanted to write a book. It was very, very fascinating to me. Plus, I always had thought, I should put that in a book. I should put that in a book. And I procrastinated for a while till I met the right publisher and that type of thing. And I said, I don't know. I have all these stories up here, but I just don't know how to get them out. And who would want to read that story anyway? And I started talking to the publisher, and he goes, your theme is what is your story?
Love it.
And the story about how I grew up in my family, how I made and learned to make financial decisions really came to light, even in the whole process of what I was.
It's probably therapeutic in a way, right?
It was very therapeutic. Very hard to let it go.
Yeah.
Once I had it written and published, it was really hard to let that first copy go.
Yeah.
It was fun though. It was really fun. And I began to see that all of my clients that I meet with, a lot of them come to me with the idea that they just wanted me to handle money or something like that.
Right.
But let's face it, in our lives, money is a decision, and it's something that affects every part of our life. And so I started to find out what their story was, which I love history, and I love to make them tick, see what makes them tick.
Yeah.
And that part of it really started to say, okay, you know what? This is why they make the decision that they make.
That's right.
And that's what's so critical to everybody, is finding out what is your story. Why do you make these decisions? And why, did you grow up in a home where your family was poor?
Right.
Did you grow up in a home where your family was living paycheck to paycheck, or was everything handed to you on a silver platter that you want to keep? And so that was the exciting part about what writing The Fabric of a Storyteller. And
such a big accomplishment too. And once you,
it is.
I know that feeling, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna hit the send button, or I'm gonna sell it. Then you're opening yourself up to criticism.
Yes.
People are they gonna like the book? Are they gonna buy the book? And as authors, this. The how many quantity of sales is not the success of a book.
Right.
It's the touch and the impact. I mean, one of my favorite stories when I did my first tour 3 years ago when the book came out at Father's Day was I had a lot of veterans of war that would hear me on media and call me and say, Mike, I'd never thought of a lot of these questions that are in this book. I'm going to go get deployed, and what if, God forbid, something were to happen to me?
Right.
And I didn't tell this to my son or daughter.
Exactly.
So people would be proactive, go get a journal and write to people. So that was really interesting to me when you see the impact, not just how many books you sell. I mean, it's great to be a New York Times best-selling author, but to go out there and make an impact on people. So I'm curious, though, what's the feedback that you've gotten over the years when they read the book?
It's been great. People have just thoroughly enjoyed. I've had one of my first clients said, "Man, I wish I would have known this before I started working with you, because then I would have worked with you." And I'm like,
nice.
But it's really fun to hear their feedback, and it's really interesting to know that people know I care.
Right.
And I really do care about them and what the factor is, that what makes them tick. And that's so fascinating. I wish I had read your book years ago before my father had passed away, and been able to ask him so many of those questions.
And the book we first launched with was about fathers, me being a father of two sons, but we have intentions of writing other books with mother in mind. You can certainly ask these questions of a mother or a grandmother or grandfather, but I hear that a lot from people saying, gosh, I wish I had an opportunity to go back and sit with my grandfather who was 90 years old and just spend an hour or 2 hours and ask questions.
Right.
So that's great.
It
so
is.
one of the things I'm curious about, how do you bring this into the business? Because you made an interesting point that and I teach this in coaching and consulting. The two things that we struggle with the most as human beings is our self-confidence, body image, weight, all that stuff, and money. You know, even if you have a bunch of it, what do you do with it? Do you reinvest it in the company? Do you spend it? What's your ROI strategy? So how do you bring the storytelling concept to the table when you're sitting? We're sitting in your beautiful conference room. You're sitting with a couple or a prospect. How do you bring that whole concept to the beginning of the relationship?
Right.
I'm curious.
Usually what a couple will do is they will slide over their documents, their statements, and that kind of thing. And I said, these are all great. These are things we're going to have to look at. But what's really important is what makes you make the decisions that you have to make. Because it's not all about me.
Right.
It's not about me at all.
Yeah.
I have to do what you want to do and help you formulate those goals and those desires. And so that's why we start with their story.
Yep.
I want to know what kind of home they grew up in.
Yeah.
I want to know who is making the decisions in the household. Is it one or is it two?
Right.
How does that all work?
Right.
And that's so important.
Yeah, that's
so
so
very
true.
important.
You know, especially when you're sitting down with somebody for the first time, and there's a vulnerability around their money and how their belief system is really what it is, but their belief is really their history.
Right.
Right. So when you understand their history, if you knew that dad was a saver or
Right.
they live paycheck to paycheck, that has a huge, that's going to be influencing their decisions as they're deciding to work with you or not. Right?
My father was a farmer, an entrepreneur, and so was my mom. So I grew up in that household and in that mentality.
Yeah.
I grew up knowing that the money from the crop had to last for the whole year.
Wow.
And that we had to make that decision and be very cautious about what decisions we made.
Yep.
And they also grew up in the Depression.
Oh, that's
and so
big
they
deal.
recycled, and that was very, very important to
Yep.
them. Whereas a lot of people, their parents both worked outside of the home and they made the decision, the kid.
Yep.
Or the kid never had any idea how much their parents made.
Right.
And they ask me, I'll get a lot of people that will actually say, how do I teach my child about money?
Yeah. Wow.
And
it's a huge need.
It is.
They don't teach that in high school.
No.
It's amazing. I remember back in the day, you had home economics. Remember home ec? They were teaching you how to run a household, but they never talked about money.
No.
They were talking about savings and put 10% here and think about your future and things of that nature. So I want to do this and we'll start wrapping up. But you get a chance and I get a chance. I'll start.
Okay.
To get you to think. So we get to each ask one question of each other.
Okay.
So the one question I have for you, given that it's Father's Day, it's the week of Father's Day, if you had, as a parent, because you have kids, and I know that that's a big part of your identity, what would you have, if you had, in this day and age, 2019, one piece of advice to give a father in this day and age? One piece based off your history, you being an author, everything that you see when people come to, it doesn't have to be about money, it could just be about life. What would be the one thing you would share?
Just remember that you're being watched.
Yeah.
You don't have to preach. You don't have to say, this is how you do it. You're being watched.
Wow.
And I think that's the key, is because they're not going to pick up what you say. It's what you do.
Right. There was a great quote. E.E. Cummings said, I can't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth because of who you're being.
Yeah.
And that's one of my
Very
favorite
true.
quotes. It's weird that you said, I didn't know you were going to say that. But that's one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah.
The top 3 quotes. I think about that as a dad is sometimes they may not hear me.
Yeah.
Because they're watching who I'm being.
Exactly.
That's great. Thank you. So what would you say? What do you got for me?
I would say that, Mike, looking back as a father, what would you do differently what do you do differently with your boys than what your father did with you?
That's a great question. I think about this a lot lately. I don't mind sharing this. I'm 46 years old, and I remember my wife actually threw me a surprise birthday party on my 40th birthday. So my sons were still here, but they were just little guys. And at 40, I still believed I'm going to live forever and it's going to be okay and I'm just going to be the best dad ever. And 6 years later, just 6 years, I've realized so much. If I would go back to 40, like at that party that night or that weekend with my friends and family, and think, what, the next 6 years of my life, I want to pay attention to things even more, even more, spend more time. And even though I travel and I do things for business and as a speaker, I'm very cognizant of being there for Rhett's first home run and practices and things of that nature. I'm very good at that. But I would step up my game a little bit when it's even more. And I say that to clients a lot, is like never before.
Right.
And I think I didn't think that way at 40, like never before. So if I had to go back and rewind 6 years of my life, I would say every single moment, every day when you wake up and when you're having those moments, whether it's at a movie or you're at the train park or you're doing whatever, really taking it in.
Yeah.
Because now, maybe it's just the reality of life, being 46 and you stare down the next half of your life. I mean, for a lot of, my grandfather was 90. So I'm at the halfway point if you think of it that way, right? So I would think that's the biggest thing. If I had to do do-overs again, it would just be remind myself, do something like never before.
Right.
That's a great
That's
question.
great.
Thank you.
That's good.
So where can people pick up a copy of your book?
They can go to Amazon.com
Okay.
and pick up The Fabric of a Storyteller.
Okay.
This is it's a quick read. It's not very lengthy, but it's a great read. I really enjoyed it.
Brevity is power. I enjoyed reading it. So for me, what's your story? You can go to MikeLindstrom.com. It's LINDSTROM. You can barely see it there at the bottom. My co-author is Vincent Staniforth. Or you can actually go to Amazon as well. So
Okay, great.
thank you so much for taking time. I would
Thank
say
you,
happy
Mike.
Father's Day to everybody out there, and
Happy
enjoy
Father's
your
Day.
time. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.